The scent of antiseptic and lilies, that was the first thing that broke through the fog. The second was the blinding flash of a diamond, not on her own hand, but on the perfectly manicured fingers of another woman. A woman standing beside her husband, her head resting on his shoulder. Emilia Chen, heiress and wife to the formidable Damien Blackwood, had been in a coma for 6 months. She woke up to find her life had been stolen. Her home, her husband, and even the ring he'd sworn was forged for her soul now belonged to his mistress. But they underestimated her. They thought the coma had weakened her, but it had only given her time to sharpen her claws. The world returned to Emilia Chen in fragments. First, a dull, persistent beeping that seemed to drill into her skull. Then the sterile scent, a cloying mix of cleaning chemicals and wilting flowers. Finally, muffled voices low and intimate, a man's deep timbre, and a woman's soft laugh. The laugh was what truly pierced the veil of her consciousness. It was light, carefree, and utterly out of place in the sterile quiet of what she was beginning to realize was a hospital room. Her eyelids felt glued shut, each a leaden weight she had to fight to lift. When she finally succeeded, the light was a physical blow, a harsh fluorescent glare that made her eyes water. She blinked once, twice, trying to bring the blurry shapes into focus. The first thing she saw clearly was him. Damien, her Damien. He was standing by the window, his broad back to her, his custom-tailored Tom Ford suit hugging his powerful frame. He was the picture of the man she had married, Damien Blackwood, the ruthless CEO of Blackwood Industries, the man who had conquered Wall Street and then her heart. But he wasn't alone. A woman was with him, her slender frame draped in a silk dress the color of champagne. Her name was Isabella Ricci, a rising starlet whose face graced the covers of tabloids, usually next to headlines, speculating about her latest conquest. Emilia had never paid them much mind. Damien had always assured her she was the only one. Isabella's perfectly manicured hand nails painted a demure blush pink rested on Damien's arm, and on her ring finger, winking maliciously in the sterile light, was Emilia's ring. It wasn't just any ring, it was the Blackwood legacy. A staggering 10-carat, flawless blue diamond that had been in his family for generations. Damien had placed it on her finger on a wind-swept cliff in Santorini, whispering that it, like his heart, was hers, forever. The sight of it on another woman's hand was a physical shock more potent than any defibrillator. A gasp, raw and choked, tore from Emilia's throat. Both heads snapped in her direction. Damien's eyes, the color of stormy seas, widened in disbelief. Isabella's perfectly shaped lips painted a seductive red, parted in a small O of surprise. Emilia Damien breathed his voice a mixture of shock and something else, something she couldn't quite decipher. Guilt. Fear. He rushed to her bedside, his large hands hovering over her, as if he were afraid to touch her. "You're awake. The doctors. They said, what is she doing here?" Emilia's voice was a harsh rasp, the words scraping her unused vocal cords. She tried to push herself up, a wave of dizziness washing over her. The room tilted, and she realized with a jolt that her belly was swollen, a firm, pronounced curve beneath the thin hospital blanket. Pregnant. She remembered now. The joy, the secret smiles she and Damien had shared the nursery, they had started to plan. It all came flooding back, a torrent of memory that crashed against the horrifying reality of the present. Isabella glided to the other side of the bed, her expression a carefully constructed mask of concern. "Emilia, darling." She cooed, her voice as smooth as honey laced with poison. "You've been asleep for a very long time. We were so worried." "Get out," Emilia whispered, her gaze locked on the ring. "And take that off. It doesn't belong to you." Isabella's smile tightened. "Oh, this Damien gave it to me. A token of his affection." She caressed the diamond, her touch proprietary. "Things have changed while you were resting." Emilia's eyes flickered to her husband, searching for a denial for him to rage at this woman and rip the ring from her finger. But Damien's gaze was fixed on the floor, his jaw tight. He couldn't meet her eyes. The silence was his confession. The beep of the heart monitor beside her bed began to accelerate, a frantic, rhythmic testament to the storm breaking inside her. A nurse, alerted by the change, bustled into the room. "Mrs. Blackwood." "You're awake." "This is a miracle." The nurse, a kind-faced woman named Mary, checked her vitals. "Your heart rate is spiking. We need you to stay calm." Calm. How could she be calm? Her world had been dismantled while she slept, her place in it usurped by a woman who was now looking at her with a mixture of pity and triumph. Damien, Emilia said, her voice shaking but gaining strength. "Tell me what is going on. Now." Before he could answer, a man in a white coat, Dr. Evans, entered the room, his face beaming. "Emilia, welcome back. We truly didn't know if this day would come." He began his routine checks, shining a light in her eyes, asking her to follow his finger. But Emilia's attention was a laser beam, focused on her husband and his companion. The baby she managed to ask, her hand instinctively going to her swollen abdomen. Dr. Evans smiled. "Your baby is a fighter just like you. Perfectly healthy. A little girl. You're at 30 weeks now. The accident. It was a miracle you both survived." The accident. Another fragmented memory surfaced. The screech of tires on wet pavement, the blinding glare of headlights, a gut-wrenching impact. And then, nothing. Blackness. "What accident?" she asked, her voice hollow. Damien finally looked at her, his expression grim. "Your car went off the Bixby Bridge. It was a stormy night. They said your brakes were cut. Cut. Not an accident. An attempt." The room felt like it was closing in. The pieces were slotting into place, forming a picture of betrayal so profound it stole her breath. "You were in a coma for 6 months, Emilia," Damien said softly. "The board at Chen Corp was in chaos. Your father's company. It was about to go under. I had to step in." "Step in." Emilia's laugh was brittle. "Is that what you call it? Taking over my company. My life." "I did what I had to do to protect our assets," he said, his voice taking on the cold, businesslike tone he used in the boardroom. "Our assets." She repeated the word, tasting like ash. "Is that what she is?" "An asset." She gestured weakly towards Isabella. Isabella let out a delicate scoff. "Damien and I have a connection. A real one. Not one based on a merger of 2 family dynasties." "Get out," Emilia said again, her voice low and dangerous. "Both of you." "Now, Emilia, be reasonable." Damien started. "Reasonable." She finally found the strength to push herself up. her eyes blazing with a fury she hadn't known she possessed. "You want reasonable. My brakes are cut. I wake up from a 6-month coma pregnant to find my husband has given my family's ring to his mistress, who is standing in my hospital room like she belongs here. There is nothing reasonable about this situation. Damien." Her shouting brought the nurse running back in. "Mrs. Blackwood." "Please, your blood pressure. I want them out," Amelia screamed, pointing a trembling finger at the door. Now Evans intervened. "Perhaps it would be best if you both came back later. She's just woken up. This is all too much of a shock." Damien hesitated, his gaze torn between his wife and his mistress. Isabella, however, placed a gentle hand on his arm. "He's right, my love. Let's give her some space." She leaned in and whispered something in his ear, a secret intimacy that was another stab to Amelia's heart. As they turned to leave, Isabella paused at the door, her eyes meeting Amelia's over her shoulder. The mask of concern was gone, replaced by a smirk of pure, unadulterated victory. Amelia watched them go, the sound of their retreating footsteps echoing the shattering of her world. She was alone in a hospital bed, her body weak, her memory fractured. But as she cradled her pregnant belly, a new fierce resolve began to smoulder in the ashes of her old life. They thought she was broken. They thought she was defeated. They had no idea who they had just woken up. The days that followed were a blur of medical tests, physical therapy, and fragmented memories returning like shards of glass. Each new recollection was a fresh wound. She remembered the fight she'd had with Damien the night of the crash. It had been about Isabella. A tabloid had published photos of them having an intimate dinner at Père Say Damien's hand lingering on the small of Isabella's back. He had dismissed it, of course. "She's a client," he'd said, his voice smooth and reassuring. "We're discussing a potential endorsement deal for Blackwood Cosmetics. You know how the paparazzi twist things, Amelia. You can't believe everything you read." She had wanted to believe him, desperately. But a seed of doubt had been planted. Now that seed had blossomed into a grotesque, thorny vine, choking the life out of everything she had held dear. Her father, Marcus Chen, a man who had once been a titan of industry, was now a ghost. He visited her, his face etched with a sorrow so deep it seemed to have aged him a decade. He held her hand, his own trembling, and confirmed what Damien had said. Chen Corp, the company he had built from the ground up, was now a subsidiary of Blackwood Industries. "He saved us, Ellie," her father whispered, his eyes avoiding hers. "We were on the brink of bankruptcy." "Damien," he swooped in, a hostile takeover, but he presented it as a merger. He said it was the only way to protect your legacy. "My legacy." Amelia's voice was cold. "Or his empire." Her father flinched. "He's your husband." "Is he?" She shot back. "Because my husband wouldn't be parading his mistress around while his wife lay in a coma." The words hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Marcus Chen knew about Isabella. The whole world probably knew. She had been the only one blind to it. Her best friend, Chloe, a sharp-witted lawyer with a penchant for designer shoes and digging up dirt, was a much-needed breath of fresh air. She arrived at the hospital armed with a matcha latte and a dossier thick enough to be a phone book. "Okay, so here's the skinny," Chloe said, pulling a chair close to Amelia's bed. "Damien and Isabella have been a thing for at least a year. The endorsement deal was a sham. He bought her a penthouse on Park Avenue and a G-Wagon. The ring, that was a recent development. He gave it to her at the Blackwood Foundation Gala about 2 months ago, in public. The man has no shame. Amelia felt a wave of nausea. He had given her ring to Isabella at a charity event, one that Amelia herself had helped organize before the accident. "What about my company?" Amelia asked, her voice barely a whisper. Chloe's expression darkened. "He gutted it. He fired your father's entire executive team, replacing them with his own people. He sold off the R&D department, the very heart of Chen Corp, to a competitor. He claims it was to streamline operations. But I think he was just stripping it for parts. The betrayal was a physical ache in her chest. Damien hadn't just taken her husband. He had systematically dismantled her entire life. And the accident, Amelia asked, dreading the answer. The police report says it was brake failure due to a severed line. They ruled it inconclusive, couldn't find a suspect. But I have my own investigator on it, a guy named Julian Vance. Ex-MI6, very discreet, very good." Chloe squeezed her hand. "We'll find out who did this to you, Ellie. I swear it." Damien visited again, this time alone. He brought a bouquet of peonies, her favorite. He placed them on the nightstand, his movements hesitant. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice soft. Amelia didn't answer. She just stared at him, her eyes cold and unforgiving. "Amelia, please," he sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "I know how this looks." "How it looks," she scoffed. "It looks like you left your pregnant wife to die shacked up with a B-list actress and stole her company. Did I miss anything?" A flash of anger crossed his face. "I did not leave you to die. I have been here every single day, waiting for you to wake up. Waiting for me to wake up. Or waiting to see if you needed to pull the plug." The words were venomous, and she saw them hit their mark. He flinched. "That's not fair." "Fair?" She repeated, her voice rising. "You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you gave my ring to her? Was it fair when you stood by and let her waltz into my hospital room? Was it fair when you let her claim my life as her own? I made a mistake," he admitted, his voice low. "Isabella. She was there for me. I was grieving Amelia. I thought I had lost you. So you replaced me," she stated, her voice flat, like a broken toy. He had no answer to that. He just stood there, a titan of industry, a man who could bring markets to their knees, rendered speechless by the woman he had wronged. "I want a divorce, Damien," she said, the words feeling both foreign and freeing. His head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock. "No. Amelia, we can work through this. We have a child on the way. This child," she said, her hand resting protectively on her belly, "is the only thing that matters to me now. And I will not raise her in a house filled with lies and betrayal. I'll end it with Isabella," he said, a note of desperation in his voice. "I'll get the ring back. We can go to counseling. Whatever it takes." But Amelia shook her head. The trust, the very foundation of their marriage, had been pulverized. It couldn't be rebuilt. "It's too late, Damien," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "I've already had my lawyer start drawing up the papers." The look on his face was a mixture of disbelief and fury. He wasn't used to being defied. He was Damien Blackwood, and he always got what he wanted. "You will not do this, Amelia," he said, his voice dropping to a low, menacing growl. "You will not take my child from me." "She is my child," Amelia retorted. Her chin held high. and I will protect her from you." He took a step closer, his presence looming over her. For a fleeting moment, she saw not the man she had loved, but a ruthless predator. "You have no idea what you're up against," he said, his voice a silken threat. "You think you can fight me? I own you, Emilia. I own your company. I own this hospital. I even own the air you breathe. You have nothing." A slow, cold smile spread across Emilia's face. "You're wrong, Damien," she said softly. "I have one thing you'll never have." He frowned, confused. "What's that?" "A reason to fight," she replied. "And a whole lot of your secrets." With that, she turned her head, dismissing him. He stood there for a long moment, his fists clenched at his sides before turning on his heel and storming out of the room. Emilia watched him go, her heart pounding, but her mind clear for the first time since she'd woken up. He had drawn the battle lines. He thought he had all the power, all the control. But he had made one fatal error. He had underestimated the woman he married. And now he was about to find out just how much of a Chen she really was. She wasn't just an heiress. She was a survivor. And she was coming for everything he had taken from her, and more. Discharged from the hospital, Emilia refused to return to the cold, opulent penthouse she had once shared with Damien. It was tainted every surface a reminder of his betrayal. Instead, Chloe helped her secure a discreet, high-security apartment in a building so exclusive it didn't even have a name overlooking Central Park. It was a fortress, her sanctuary, as she prepared for war. Her body was still weak, the lingering effects of the coma, a constant frustration. But her mind was a razor. The 6 months of forced stillness had given her an unexpected gift clarity. Stripped of the distractions of her former life, she could see the chessboard with perfect precision. Chloe's investigator, Julian Vance, was a phantom, a man in his late 40s with pale, watchful eyes and an air of perpetual calm. He met Emilia in her new apartment, not a hair out of place, his suit impeccably tailored. He didn't look like a private eye. He looked like a tenured professor of philosophy. "Mr. Vance," Emilia began, her voice steady as she poured him a cup of tea. "Julian." "Please," he said, his voice a quiet baritone. "I've reviewed the preliminary findings. The severed brake line was a professional job. No tool marks, no prints. Whoever did it knew their way around a car. I have a list," Emilia said, sliding a piece of paper across the marble coffee table. It contained the names of Damien's inner circle, the board members he had installed at Chen Corp, and at the top of the list, Isabella Ricci. Julian glanced at it, his expression unreadable. "A good place to start. But I think our first move should be less direct." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a slim, innocuous-looking USB drive. "Damien Blackwood is a man who lives on the cloud. His entire life, his business dealings, his personal correspondence, it's all digitized, encrypted, and stored on Blackwood Industries' private servers. He thinks they're impenetrable. And you think you can get in, Emilia?" asked a flicker of hope igniting within her. A rare, fleeting smile touched Julian's lips. "I have a particular set of skills. Before I went private, I worked in signals intelligence. Let's just say I know my way around a firewall." The plan was audacious. While Julian worked on cracking Damien's digital fortress, Emilia and Chloe would focus on the human element. They needed leverage, something to destabilize Damien's carefully constructed empire. Their first target was Thomas Cartwright, Damien's CFO and right-hand man. Cartwright was a creature of habit, a man whose life ran on a predictable schedule. He was also a man with a secret gambling addiction that had him in deep with a loan shark in Atlantic City. "How did you find this out?" Amelia asked, amazed, as Chloe presented her with photos of Cartwright, looking panicked at a high-stakes poker table. "A girl has her sources," Chloe said with a wink. "And a well-placed bug in his favorite bar. He's been funneling company money to cover his debts. Small amounts cleverly disguised as expense reports, but it's enough." Amelia studied the photos, a cold knot of determination tightening in her stomach. This was the world Damien had dragged her into, a world of secrets and blackmail, where morality was a luxury she could no longer afford. She arranged a chance encounter. Knowing Cartwright had a regular Thursday lunch at Jean-Georges, a place she and Damien used to frequent, she booked a table nearby. She timed her arrival perfectly, just as he was settling in. She walked past his table, pausing as if she had just noticed him. "Thomas, is that you?" Cartwright's face went pale. He looked like a man who had seen a ghost. "Amelia, Mrs. Blackwood, I heard you were awake," she finished for him, a cool smile on her lips. "The rumors are true. May I?" She gestured to the empty chair opposite him without waiting for an answer. For the next 20 minutes, she played the part of the wronged, heartbroken wife. She spoke of her recovery of her fears for her unborn child. She didn't mention Damien's infidelity or the corporate takeover. She let Cartwright's own guilt do the work. Then, just as the waiter brought his appetizer, she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The thing is, Thomas being in a coma gives you a lot of time to think. To remember things, little details, like discrepancies in the quarterly reports, things that didn't make sense at the time." She saw the flicker of panic in his eyes. He started to sweat, dabbing at his forehead with a linen napkin. "I'm sure it's nothing," she continued, her tone light. "Just a few irregularities. I'm thinking of hiring an independent auditor to go over the books. Just to put my mind at ease, you understand, before the divorce proceedings get messy." The threat was veiled but unmistakable. An audit would uncover his embezzlement. It would mean ruin not just professionally but personally. The loan sharks would not be as forgiving as the SEC. "What do you want?" he finally croaked, his appetite gone. "Information," Amelia said simply. "I want to know everything Damien has planned for Chen Corp. Every deal, every asset he's planning to strip, every skeleton in his closet. You will be my eyes and ears inside his company." Cartwright looked trapped. He was a pawn caught between two powerful players. But Amelia was offering him a way out. Damien would just crush him. And in return he asked. "Your secret stays safe," she promised. "And perhaps when I regain control of my company, there might still be a place for someone with your talents." He nodded a silent, defeated acknowledgement of his new allegiance. She had him. That evening, Julian delivered his own victory. He arrived at her apartment late, a triumphant glint in his usually placid eyes. "I'm in," he announced, plugging the USB drive into her laptop. The screen lit up with files and folders, a digital map of Damien Blackwood's entire life. Emails, text messages, encrypted financial records, offshore accounts, call logs. It was all there, a treasure trove of secrets. "I've installed a back door," Julian explained. "We'll have real-time access to everything. It's like we're a ghost in his machine." Emilia spent the entire night poring over the data, a growing sense of horror and rage building within her. The affair with Isabella was just the tip of the iceberg. There were others. Models, actresses, even the wife of a business rival. Damien's infidelities were a sprawling, sordid network of deceit. But it was the business dealings that truly shocked her. He was planning to dissolve Chen Corp, entirely selling off its patents and absorbing its most profitable divisions into Blackwood Industries, effectively erasing her family's legacy from existence. He had used the merger as a Trojan horse to plunder her company from the inside. Then she found it. Buried deep in an encrypted folder labeled Contingency was a subfolder titled Isabella. It contained a series of wire transfers, not to Isabella herself, but to a shell corporation based in the Cayman Islands. The dates of the transfers were what made Emilia's blood run cold. The largest one, for $2 million, was dated the day after her accident. "Julian," she called out, her voice trembling. "I think I found something." He came over, peering at the screen. He traced the wire transfers, his brow furrowed in concentration. With a few keystrokes, he began to unravel the Shell Corporation's tangled ownership. After 10 minutes of silent, furious typing, he leaned back, his face grim. "The corporation is owned by a man named Leo Petrov, ex-KGB, now a freelance operative. He specializes in wet work." The term hung in the air, chilling Emilia to the bone. "And there's more," Julian said, his voice low. He pulled up a grainy traffic camera photo from the night of the accident. It showed a dark sedan tailing Emilia's car on the approach to the Bixby Bridge. The license plate was untraceable, but the man in the driver's seat, though blurry, had a distinctively scarred eyebrow. Julian cross-referenced the photo with his own database. A match came up. Leo Petrov. The room spun. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just a corporate takeover. Damien hadn't just left her to die. He had paid to have her killed. And Isabella was in on it. The money, the timing, it was all there. She wasn't just a mistress. She was a co-conspirator. The baby inside her kicked a sudden, sharp movement, as if sensing its mother's distress. Emilia placed a hand on her belly, a wave of primal protective fury washing over her. This was no longer about a divorce. This was no longer about getting her company back. This was about survival. This was about justice. Damien and Isabella hadn't just tried to erase her from the boardroom. They had tried to erase her from the face of the earth. They had started a war. And Emilia Chen, armed with the truth and the unwavering fire of a mother's love, was going to burn their world to the ground. The confirmation that Damien had tried to murder her landed not with the heat of rage, but with the chilling stillness of absolute certainty. The love she'd felt, the life she'd built, it had all been a lie, constructed around a man who was not just an adulterer, but a monster. Grief was a luxury she couldn't afford. It had been cauterized by the stark, ugly truth. In its place, a cold, meticulous resolve settled deep in her bones. She wasn't just fighting for her company anymore. She was fighting for her daughter's life and for her own. Before she could strike at the king, she had to neutralize his queen. Isabella Ricci was Damien's most glaring vulnerability. Vain, greedy, and utterly intoxicated by the power she now wielded by proxy. She was a weapon waiting to be turned against its master. "She thinks she's untouchable," Emilia said to Chloe and Julian, her voice devoid of emotion as she stared out at the city lights from her apartment. "She's flaunting a ring bought with blood money." That kind of arrogance makes people careless. The plan they devised was worthy of a Machiavellian thriller. Chloe leveraging her skills for mimicry and a forged set of credentials that would pass muster even with a top talent agency transformed herself into Jocelyn Finch, a high-powered casting director. The bait was exquisite tailored perfectly to Isabella's ego, an audition for a secret Martin Scorsese film, a leading role opposite Leonardo DiCaprio. It was the one thing Damien's money couldn't buy her legitimacy. The request for a private meeting with a non-disclosure agreement that precluded agents or assistants was framed as a quirk of the famously secretive director. The location was set a sprawling suite at the Carlisle Hotel, a bastion of old-world discretion, its plush carpets and silent corridors accustomed to swallowing secrets. On the day of the sting, Emilia was a coiled spring of tension. She sat in the suite's adjoining bedroom. The door cracked just enough to hear her eyes fixed on a tablet, displaying a live feed from a camera hidden in a vase of orchids. Julian was a floor below a silent guardian angel, monitoring hotel communications, ready to digitally erase their presence from security logs the moment they were done. Isabella arrived precisely on time, sweeping into the suite like she owned it. She was a vision of performative wealth in a garish Balenciaga ensemble, the Blackwood Legacy diamond on her finger flashing like a warning beacon. She radiated a smug, triumphant confidence that made Emilia's stomach turn. Chloe as Jocelyn Finch was a masterclass in deception. She was warm, effusive, and utterly convincing. Flattering Isabella's meager talent and speaking in hushed, reverent tones about Scorsese's supposed personal interest in her untapped potential. Isabella starved for genuine artistic validation, drank it all in. Her ego, already inflated, swelled to dangerous proportions. "The role is incredibly demanding," Chloe said, her tone shifting to one of serious artistic gravity. She slid a few pages of script across the polished mahogany table. "It's a complex character. A woman who is deeply obsessively in love, but also terrifyingly manipulative. She's caught in a dark conspiracy with her powerful lover. This scene, this is the crux of the film. It's where she confesses her part in a terrible, terrible crime." Emilia watched on the tablet as Isabella picked up the pages, her smile indulgent. As her eyes scanned the lines, the smile slowly froze, then melted away. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving two garish splotches of rouge on a canvas of white. The script was a horrifying mirror. The dialogue described a woman whispering poison into her lover's ear, convincing him that his pregnant wife was a liability, an obstacle to their perfect future. It detailed a clandestine payment to a shadowy assassin, a severed brake line on a stormy night, a car plunging into the dark, churning sea. This is sick," Isabella stammered the script pages, fluttering from her trembling hands onto the table as if they were on fire. Chloe's friendly facade evaporated, replaced by an expression of pure ice. "Is it?" she asked, her voice dropping each word, precise and sharp. "Or is it just a little too close to home?" "I don't know what you're talking about." Isabella blustered, her voice a high-pitched squeak of fear. She fumbled for the diamond-encrusted phone in her purse, a lifeline to Damien. Chloe was faster. Her hand shot out, covering the phone. "I think you do, Isabella," she said calmly. "Let's talk about Leo Petrov and the $2 million wire transfer to his Cayman Islands Shell Corporation, the one that was executed the day after Emilia Blackwood's accident. We know everything." Pure, unadulterated panic ripped across Isabella's face. The carefully constructed mask of the confident socialite shattered, revealing the terrified cornered animal beneath. The world of couture and champagne evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard reality of consequence. Damien. She whimpered the name, both a plea and an accusation. It was all his idea. I swear it. I went along with it. I loved him. I would have done anything for him. Love is not an excuse for attempted murder. Chloe stated, her voice flat and unforgiving. And that was Amelia's cue. She pushed open the connecting door and stepped into the room. She was a ghost of vengeance, clad in a simple, elegant black dress. Her pregnancy, now impossible to hide, was a silent, powerful testament to the life they had tried to extinguish. If Isabella had looked pale before, she was now translucent. A small, strangled gasp escaped her lips, and she physically recoiled, scrambling backward in her chair, as if to put distance between herself and the phantom who had returned from the grave. Emilia. She breathed the name, a whisper of disbelief and terror. "Hello, Isabella," Emilia said. Her voice was unnervingly serene, a calm sea before a tsunami. She began to walk slowly and deliberately around the table, her gaze pinning Isabella in place. "I believe you have something of mine." She reached Isabella's side. She didn't wait for permission. She grabbed Isabella's left hand, her grip shockingly strong, a product of weeks of physical therapy and sheer force of will. Isabella flinched, but was too paralyzed by fear to resist. With her other hand, Emilia took hold of the Blackwood legacy. For a moment, she just held it, looking at the magnificent cold stone on the finger of the woman who had helped try to kill her. Then, with a slow, deliberate twist, she slid it off. The ring came free with a soft shink, a sound of profound restitution that echoed in the silent room. Emilia slipped the ring onto her own finger. It felt cold against her skin, an alien object. But it was home. It was never about love. Was it? Emilia continued, her voice a low, dangerous murmur that was more penetrating than a shout. It was about this. The money, the power, the status. You were nothing but a parasite, Isabella, looking for a host. And I was just a bothersome obstacle to be swept away. No, He promised me everything. Isabella was sobbing now, ugly, racking sobs that shook her slender frame. Black tears of mascara carved paths through her expensive foundation. He promised we'd be together. He swore you were never going to wake up, and you were counting on that, weren't you? Emilia's voice was laced with contempt. She leaned down, bringing her face close to Isabella's. Here is what's going to happen now. You are going to sit in that chair, and you are going to give my associate a full, detailed and recorded confession. You will describe Damien's entire plot, from the very first conversation about getting rid of me to the selection of Leo Petrov to the transfer of funds. You will give us everything. A flicker of the old defiance sparked in Isabella's tear-filled eyes. And if I don't, she sniffled, he'll protect me. He's Damien Blackwood. He'll never let anything happen to me. Emilia's laugh was a short, sharp, terrifying sound. She leaned in closer still, her whisper a thread of poison. Damien Blackwood is about to have far more pressing problems than your welfare. If you confess now, you become a state's witness. You cooperate, you might get a reduced sentence, a new identity. You might survive this. If you don't, well, Julian has already sent an anonymous tip to a certain Mr. Petrov. A little birdie told him that his accomplice is getting nervous, that she's thinking of talking to the authorities. Petrov is a professional, Isabella. He cleans up his own loose ends. Do you really think Damien can protect you from the hitman he hired to kill his own wife, or that he would even bother to try? The last ember of fight in Isabella's eyes died extinguished by the cold water of truth. She understood. She was a pawn, and she had been sacrificed. Her only chance of survival now was to betray the king. She collapsed in on herself, nodding her head frantically, her sobs devolving into incoherent wails. "I'll do it," she gasped. "I'll tell you everything. Just keep him away from me." The confession that followed was a sordid, chilling narrative of greed and psychopathy. As Chloe recorded, Isabella, stripped of all her glamour and artifice, recounted the entire cold-blooded plot. When it was finally over, Emilia felt no rush of triumph, no satisfying thrill of victory. She just felt a profound, cavernous emptiness. The man she had married, the man whose child she carried, was a monster. This confession was the final nail in the coffin of the life she had once known. She left Isabella in Chloe's capable hands to be delivered like a sealed package to the district attorney. Emilia could not be officially connected to this. Not yet. She walked out of the gilded lobby of the Carlyle and into the chaos of a bustling New York afternoon. The city pulsed with life, the blare of horns, the chatter of 1,000 conversations, the relentless forward motion of a world entirely oblivious to the life and death drama that had just unfolded in a suite high above its streets. She clutched the cold, heavy ring on her finger. It was no longer a symbol of love or even of betrayal. It was a weapon, a reminder of the battle she had just won and the war that was still to come. She had taken Damien's queen. Now it was time to go after the king. The night before the Blackwood Industries shareholders' meeting, Emilia didn't sleep. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of her fortress apartment. The glittering panorama of Central Park spread below her like a carpet of fallen stars. In her hand, she held a small, beautifully carved wooden elephant, a piece from the mobile she and Damien had bought for the nursery, in a lifetime that felt like it belonged to someone else. The rage that had sustained her for weeks had cooled, settling into a core of pure glacial resolve. Tomorrow was not just about vengeance. It was about reclaiming a future for the child sleeping soundly in her womb, a future that her husband had tried to murder before it had even begun. Chloe sat on the sofa, a laptop open, but ignored. "Are you sure about this, Ellie? Walking in there alone, it's a lion's den. He needs to see me," Emilia said, her voice quiet but firm, her reflection a spectral image in the dark glass. The board, the press, the world, they all need to see me. Not as a victim, but as the woman he failed to break. She turned, placing the elephant carefully on the mantelpiece. "Julian, is everything in place?" From the armchair in the corner, the phantom-like investigator gave a curt nod, his face illuminated by the glow of a tablet. "The back door to the servers is stable. The presentation visuals are loaded and slaved to my device. The DA's team is on standby 2 blocks away. The security chief at the Lincoln Center has been persuaded. Your entrance is secure. When you give the signal, the dominoes will fall." The signal. It all came down to her. The thought sent a tremor of fear through her, sharp and cold, but she pushed it down. Fear was a luxury. Tonight, she was a general on the eve of battle. She had marshaled her forces, studied her enemy, and laid her trap. The next day, the atmosphere at the Lincoln Center was electric with the hum of power and money. Titans of finance, tech moguls, and journalists from every major outlet filled the velvet seats of the grand auditorium. On stage, Damien Blackwood was in his element. He commanded the space with the easy arrogance of a modern-day emperor, his Tom Ford suit a sleek armor, his voice resonating with confidence as he detailed a quarter of a record-breaking profits. He was charming, dominant, invincible. The applause that followed his opening remarks was deafening. He was at the absolute zenith of his power, a king addressing his court. And that's when his ghost walked in. From the deep shadows of the stage-left wings, a figure emerged. Emilia. She moved into the harsh glare of the spotlights. A vision in an ivory Alexander McQueen power suit, the cut expertly tailored to embrace her 8-month pregnancy. On her finger, the Blackwood Legacy diamond did not sparkle. It seemed to absorb the light, a cold, dark star. The thunderous applause did not just falter, it shattered. A wave of silence, profound and absolute, washed over the auditorium, followed by a tidal wave of gasps and frantic whispers. 1,000 smartphones were raised, their lenses all focused on the impossible sight. The official story was that Emilia Blackwood was in a Swiss clinic, her mind and body broken. Yet here she stood, poised and powerful, a living refutation of his narrative. Damien froze mid-sentence, the self-satisfied smile melting from his face to be replaced by a mask of chalky disbelief. His blood ran cold. He stared at her as if she were an apparition, his mind struggling to process the reality of her presence. Emilia, he stammered the name, a choked whisper, amplified by the microphone, to every corner of the hall. "What are you doing here?" She didn't look at him. She advanced to the center of the stage, her gaze sweeping across the stunned faces of the shareholders, the board members, the press. She moved with a deliberate, unhurried grace that belied the frantic pounding of her heart. "I believe I'm still a majority shareholder in this company," Emilia said, her voice cool and clear, slicing through the tense silence. She walked to the podium, claiming the space beside her husband. He was trapped, a king suddenly cornered on his own throne. To have security remove his visibly pregnant wife would be an admission of guilt he could not afford. "I thought I should attend." He tried to recover, forcing a strained, condescending smile. "My dear, you should be resting. The board and I have everything well in hand." He placed a hand on her arm, a gesture of patronizing control. Emilia pulled her arm away, as if his touch were toxic. "I'm sure you do," she said, her voice laced with steel. She turned to the audience. "My husband has just presented you with a very rosy picture of Blackwood Industries' performance, and its true profits are up, but I think our shareholders, the true owners of this company, deserve to know the real cost of that success." This was Julian's cue. On the enormous screen behind them, Damien's triumphant profit charts vanished, replaced instantly by the stark black-and-white image of a wire transfer document. Damien's eyes widened in horror. He spun around, his face contorting with rage. "Turn that off!" he hissed at a technician in the wings. "Now." But the technician simply held up his hands, shrugging helplessly. He no longer had control of his own stage. This payment, Emilia's voice rang with unshakable authority, for $2 million was made from a discretionary fund to a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands, a company owned by a man named Leo Petrov. The screen shifted. Petrov's thuggish, scarred face filled the massive display, a mugshot that radiated brutality. The collective gasp from the audience was audible. This payment was made. Emilia continued her pacing. deliberate, each word a hammer blow, the day after my car's brake lines were mysteriously severed, sending me and my unborn child into the sea, and me into a 6-month coma. An accident from which, as you can see, I have thankfully recovered. The auditorium erupted into chaos. Shouts of "What is this and is this true?" echoed through the hall. Reporters were on their feet, yelling questions, the flash of their cameras a blinding, ceaseless strobe. "This is absurd," Damien roared into the microphone, his voice cracking with desperation. "My wife is clearly unwell. She's been through a terrible ordeal. Her mind is... it's not sound. She's delusional. This is a fabrication, a sick fantasy." "Is it?" Amelia's voice cut through the noise like a razor. She gave a slight nod, a signal only Julian would understand. "Or is it a confession?" And then the final devastating blow. The screen changed again, this time to a video. The stark, sterile walls of an interrogation room. And in the center, Isabella Ricci, stripped of all her glamour, her face blotchy and swollen from tears. Damien's world stopped. He stared at the screen at the face of the woman he had used and discarded, and knew he was finished. Isabella's voice, trembling but clear, filled the grand hall. It was his idea, she sobbed. All of it. He said she was a liability, that with her and the baby gone he would have everything. He called it a final solution. The confession played out in all its sordid, chilling detail. The auditorium fell into a stunned, horrified silence. The only sound was Isabella's broken voice, confessing to a conspiracy of greed and murder. Damien stood paralyzed, a statue of ruin. His face a grotesque portrait of a man watching his life being publicly dissected and burned to ash. His gaze shifted from the screen to Amelia, and in his eyes she saw no remorse, no regret, only pure murderous hatred for the woman who had destroyed him. Just as the video faded to black, the main doors of the auditorium burst open with a resounding bang. District Attorney Henderson, a bulldog of a man with a righteous fury in his eyes, strode down the center aisle flanked by a phalanx of uniformed NYPD officers. Their presence was an electrifying jolt, turning the corporate spectacle into a crime scene. "Damien Blackwood," Henderson's voice boomed, needing no microphone. "You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Amelia Blackwood and conspiracy to commit murder." Two officers mounted the stage, their movements swift and professional. They grabbed Damien's arms. For a moment he resisted a final reflexive act of defiance. But then the fight drained out of him. He sagged utterly and completely defeated as they wrenched his hands behind his back, and the cold steel of handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. As they led him away, a pariah in the temple, where he had just been crowned king, his eyes found Amelia's one last time. They held a cold, chilling promise of retribution, a promise that this was not over. But Amelia was no longer afraid. She stood alone in the spotlight, the chaos swirling around her, and placed a hand on her belly. In the quiet sanctuary of her body, her daughter kicked a gentle, fluttering reassurance. It was a promise of her own, a promise of life. She had done it. She had faced the monster in his own lair and brought his kingdom crashing down. She had reclaimed her life, her company, and her future. The path ahead would be a gauntlet, a high-profile trial, the rebuilding of her family's legacy, raising a child alone. But as she looked out at the sea of shocked faces, she felt not triumph, but a profound, quiet sense of peace. She had walked through the fire and emerged not scorched but forged. She was Amelia Chen Blackwood, and she was just getting started. The world had tried to silence her, but now they would have no choice but to listen to her roar. The story doesn't end with Damien's arrest. It's just the beginning of Emilia's new chapter. The trial that followed was the stuff of legends, a media circus that captivated the nation. But through it all, Emilia stood tall, a symbol of resilience and strength, not just for herself, but for her beautiful baby girl, Lily, who became her reason for everything. She rebuilt Chen Corp from the ashes, transforming it into a global powerhouse that dwarfed even Damien's crumbling empire. She proved that you can be a loving mother and a ruthless CEO, that your greatest wounds can become your greatest strengths. If Emilia's incredible journey from victim to victor moved you, please show your support. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs a story of empowerment, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more tales of unbelievable drama and inspiring resilience. Your support helps us bring these stories to light.